Welcome to the Competitive 40K podcast, brought to you by Vanguard Tactics. 40K Codex analysis, list building, strategy development, game theory, mentoring. Our mission? To help you become a better player and to raise the level of the game both on and off the tabletop. Here's your host, Stephen Box.
Hey guys, welcome back. This is episode number 11, and today we have an awesome show lined up. Not only are myself, Joe, and Jack going to be discussing some of the biggest mistakes people make when it comes to army list writing, and the goal of this is to help you avoid those same mistakes that we see people make time and time again. And obviously we've helped hundreds of people now through our academy, tailor and tweak their list to make sure that they're really well-rounded, balanced, competitive, but also in a play style that really appeals to them. And that's obviously leading to some really good success at the tabletop. And obviously if you don't have the right army list, then it's going to cause some big problems for you, and you're just never going to really feel like you can get off the starting block, and everything's going to feel like it's going against you. No matter how good you are as a player, you're not just going to have the ability to really sort of wield that in the right way. So yes, skill set is important, but you do have to have a respect for how good your army list is. So we're going to cover that in a lot more detail in today's show. And also in the second half of this show, I am joined by the legendary Paul Murphy, and we're going to talk all things Blood Angels. So last week we did Dark Angels with Jack. This week me and Paul is a huge fan of the Blood Angels, just like I am. So we have a really good chat about some of the new things that are coming up. So make sure you stay tuned to how we're considering changing our lists. Now we've obviously got the new Space Marine Codex and also the Index. So anyway, let's get on to, first of all, the most important thing. Tomorrow, Army List Masterclass, completely for free. And if you want to get signed up for it, all you need to do is head over to the blog post, which is www.vanguardtactics.com/blog/S2EP11, and all the details for this masterclass are tomorrow. So make sure you go and sign up for that if you're interested in taking what you learn now to that next level. It is completely for free. But anyway, guys, Joe, how you doing?
I'm good. I've got a less squeaky chair today. Less editing for me later.
Good man.
Very
like
exciting.
It. Oh, there we go. Bit of squeak. And then Jack, how are you doing, Jack?
I'm very well, Stephen. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing good, mate. I'm doing good. I'm excited to talk about this topic. It's a topic that I've been talking about kind of all week. We've been talking about it through the emails that people subscribe to our emails newsletter. I've been giving over hopefully some good value there. Really looking forward to getting stuck into this topic. So I thought we would do a bit of a round robin, and we'll go around the room. Give me a mistake you typically see, and then cover potentially why is it a problem, and maybe an example of where people are going wrong with this sort of style of these mistakes. All right, so I'm going to start off with you, Joe.
Pressure.
No pressure. Make it a good one. What is a mistake you see people make?
So this is one that I've become more aware of. We're doing the Army List Clinic for the Academy.
Yeah, and just so you guys are aware, we have a show every single week that's on the Academy for our students where they submit their lists, don't they?
Yeah.
They submit their army lists with their justifications and doing their homework tasks that we set them through the modules. And then what we do is we analyze and review them. And there's actually, if you want to see one of those in action, we did a free one yesterday. We just made it public to everybody, and that's actually on YouTube, so you can check that out. And we reviewed an Imperial Fist list and also a Necron list, and we give again some feedback and thoughts. So carry on with what you've been saying there, though, Joe.
So to give an example, for instance, like a Blood Angels player, something you know a lot about. Blood Angels players would be like, okay, I want a Smash Captain.
Yep.
I want Lamartes. I want Astaroth.
Yep.
I want the Sanguinor.
Yep.
And
a Librarian.
Yep. For instance. And you're like, okay, so I've got 5 characters. I need to fit these into my army. So I'm looking at a patrol and a battalion.
Yeah.
So those 2 extra characters are costing you 2 CP. Whereas those 2 extra characters are fulfilling similar roles to what other characters already do within that list. So you can trim them off quite comfortably. So for instance, the Sanguinor is a bit of a beat stick.
Yeah, I think it's, like you said, it is. They feel like they're necessities, aren't they?
Yeah.
You feel like, okay, I need Sanguinor for this reason, I need the Smash Captain for that reason, or whatever the latest popular one is, like whether it's one with a Teeth of Terror at the moment or Lightning Claws or whatever, and you're like, right, well, I need the Sanguinary Priest and I need the Librarian for this, and you're like, well, it feels like they're all necessary until you actually break them all down. And I'll be honest, this is very much like dieting.
Yeah.
You got to make some hard choices. You can't have donuts, cake and biscuits. You'll be lucky when you're on a diet to have one. You got to make some hard choices.
Especially work in this office. Yeah. The glares I get.
I've just found out where I've been going wrong all these years. But
you can have one, guys, all right?
Yeah.
Pick one.
Yeah. Or stack them all together to make some kind of donut biscuit sandwich.
Yeah.
My man, Joe. My man.
Yeah, so if you can just squeeze in your characters into one detachment, all 5, then it's fine. Yeah. But it doesn't quite work, obviously.
Yeah. So in this example, you could go, well, the Sanguinor is now, he's a bit of a beatstick character, so he fulfills the same role as what the Smash Captain does. So you go, do I need both of these? Well, I don't really need the Smash Captain because my Sanguinary Guard are also a dedicated close combat unit. So I don't need this single character when this squad puts out more attacks than he does.
Yeah, and I think you're right there. It's a case of making sure that you are really justifying why he's in the list, right?
Yeah.
So if you've got, I think you made a good example earlier off air. You said about how if you've got a captain and a chaplain, but you've got a very combat heavy list, maybe the chaplain's the better option.
Yeah.
Because he re-rolls the buffs, or if you can get a +1 to the hit roll through another way, let's say the Banner Ancient, then you don't need the chaplain, you can just take a captain, because if you're hitting on 2s re-rolling 1s, that's as good as re-rolling misses when you hit on 3s. So again, like, sometimes you just have to be hard on yourself, don't you?
Yeah.
Like, I've really struggled with my Ultramarines list. I love taking 3 units of suppressors, but I now want to include a unit of Inceptors. So I'm like, well, I can't fit 4 fast attack in a list. I'm going to have to cut something. So now I'm bringing in the Inceptors because they fulfill a slightly different role to the suppressors. And although, the way I justified this to myself was actually suppressors gained an extra shot per model, which now means I'm actually getting the same amount of shots from a 3-man unit I'm now getting the same amount of shots from 2 3-man units as I was in 8th edition when I was running 3 units of 3, because they've all gained that extra shot. I'm actually getting, pretty much the same punch. So that just allows me to justify how much damage they can do, because in 8th edition I knew I needed that much volume of shots to achieve something. So I'm still getting that now because of the buffs they've been given. So that's helped me justify my choices a little bit better.
Yeah.
No, I really like it. Yeah, good point.
And another example is that is sometimes spending the extra points instead of the CP is a good change. For instance, with the Gene Stealer cult that we ran on the channel, that was a battalion and a patrol. Whereas it's a really CP hungry army. Is there a way that we can make this into a brigade and put in like a few tax units, but those tax units actually fulfill another role? So for instance, we put in 3 units of 3 mortars to fill the heavy support. Well, those guys, they're good at killing Horde, which is something that the list is missing, and also they can sit on backline objectives and allow your actual dedicated close combat units to go forward and do something instead of babysitting objectives.
Yeah, I like it, yeah. Even if they're literally they got big old bases, even if they're screening out your backfield and doing actions for you, brilliant. Protecting your characters, fantastic. Yeah, I like that. Okay, Jack, I'm going to pass this next one over to you. So the first one there was spending CPs on detachments that you might not need, or just sort of spending extra than you really have to. What's your next tip that people need to avoid and why?
So the first one I'm going for is overall list identity.
Okay, explain what that means, Jack.
So right at the beginning of the list building stage, you get your pen and paper out, or you get your favourite app out and go, I want to build a list. And for me, I need an idea of what that list wants to do. So is it going to be a gun line? Is it going to be a combat army? Is it going to be a highly mobile list, or maybe like a really resilient list? I think those are probably the most common kind of archetypes there. And then when you're going through and putting all the individual components into that list, it's always used to have a check and balance against the original idea that you had of the army that you wanted to create at that time. So I think it get quite easy when you're throwing units in and out and chopping and changing, that you may end up with a different list than you intended to in the first place.
Oh, so like if you're running, let's use the Blood Angels as an example. You obviously Blood Angels notoriously are a good combat list, and then you think, well, I wouldn't mind a Whirlwind because I've got this really good stratagem, so I'll add a Whirlwind in. Okay, well I want to buff the Whirlwind so he can reliably hit, but one Whirlwind doesn't do enough, so maybe I add another one in, and all of a sudden you're just kind of pulling more and more away from the true identity of a fast mobile combat list. Because you're thinking, right, well, I'll put an intercessor squad in there and I'll do this because I need some backfield objectives. So end up, like you said, you're just completely going away from what the Blood Angels do best, right? So I really like that. Have you got any other sort of examples that you could just throw in there, Jack?
Yeah, it's, I think it was when I first started playing Orcs, and I built a list. I thought it was going to be a really killy combat army. But what we found when we started playtesting it together was actually it wasn't a killy army at all, really. It had some punch, but it was more of a ball control army. So sometimes list builds and factions may not necessarily play as you initially thought, or they can be flexible to play a couple of different ways. So it's always something to consider, is get the play testing in with it as well. Does this actually do what I want it to do, what I initially designed it for?
Yeah, and playtesting is one of those most crucial parts of the list writing process, and something I'm going to be covering tomorrow on the Masterclass in a bit more detail, and also giving some structure for people and teaching them how to actually playtest appropriately, because there's a big difference between just playtesting with a friend and them thinking you're having a game to see who can win. You're trying to play test a certain element of your list, and we're going to cover probably that in a little bit more detail. So no, I really like that, Jack. So my one I'm going to cover is not having enough redundancy in a list. Now, redundancy is something in which you can often be used sort of incorrectly, and I know Jack's got something which he'll talk about which kind of leads on from this a little bit more. But let's say you need to achieve certain things in the game. So 40k at the moment is extremely varied. It's probably the most varied it's ever been. Obviously, I know we're going for a bit of a Space Marine meta at the moment, and we kind of have been for the last 6 months, but a lot of the other factions are still very playable because of the new 9th edition mission pack. I really truly believe that. So you need to be able to go to a tournament and have a list that will be able to kill 7 knights, with a 4-up invern, toughness 7, toughness 8, and but anywhere between like 12 and 24 wounds. You need to be able to consistently kill a knight a turn, if not 2 war dogs a turn. And if you don't have the redundancy in the list, then what that means is, if you've just got that one unit of eradicators to do that job, well, what happens when your opponent goes, okay, well, you've got that one unit that really hurts me, I'm going to get rid of that one unit. So now you've got nothing else to use, and you're just going to constantly feel like, well, I had this one anti-tank option and it didn't do its job. Or you're throwing in, I don't know, one fusion pistol into a Harlequin squad because you think, okay, that melter gun shot will do, D6 damage to a vehicle. Well, no, it's not going to be enough. Even one unit of troops with 5 fusion pistols probably won't do anything with a 4+ invulnerable save, because you're hitting on 3s, meaning out of the 5 shots you're gonna miss with 2. Then you're gonna wound on a 4, so again maybe 1 or 2 go through, and then they've got 4+ invulnerable save, so again maybe 1 goes through if you're lucky. The average damage you'll do is 3.5, so you're gonna need about 5 or 6 boats worth of fusion pistols in order to actually significantly do anything, because also you've got to take into consideration the variance on the dice. Your first boat of Harlequin bikes, or let's just say the bikes with the fusion pistols, the first squad might absolutely whiff it, right? The next squad might absolutely tank it, and then the next one might kind of be somewhere in between. So you need a good amount of sort of variance in there, and enough redundancy. So if the first one does it, the second one should, and if he doesn't, then the third one definitely does. So I really, really like the rule of 3, and you can build redundancy in through knowing what your list can do through different phases of the game as well. So yes, you could have a unit of eradicators, and yes, you could have a unit of aggressors, and actually they can perform the same role of killing knights, because The Eradicators can do it in the shooting phase, and the Aggressors can do it in the combat phase. But again, it all comes down to justifying why those units are in the list. So making sure you've got enough redundancy and not just wasting those little points on, I'll put a melter gun in here, I'll do this on that, or whatever it might be. So have a clear purpose for each of your units, and make sure you know exactly what they are. Okay, Joe, over to you. What's the next one?
The next one I'm going to go for is list tailoring.
Ooh, controversial, Joe.
It is controversial.
What is list tailoring?
So list tailoring is, say, for instance, you're going down, well, probably not at the moment because of the pandemic, you're going down the club to play some of your mates.
The local gaming store.
Yeah, or you're going over to your friend's house.
Yeah.
And you go, what army are you running tonight, Steve?
I'm going to run Eldar.
Yeah, okay, cool. So what I'm going to do is take an army of anti-psychers and resilient, like just resilient troops that all your little strength 4 guns will just kind of patter off.
Okay, so you're going to take like a heavy aggressor list.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. And will that be fun?
Yeah, no, exactly. It's one of those things that is you don't have to spend long in a Facebook group, do you?
No.
In a very sort of faction-specific one, and it's like, oh guys, I'm playing against Custodes tomorrow. What army list should I take, or what units should I take?
Yeah.
And obviously, this person 2 weeks before may have put in there, playing against Death Guard tonight. What shall I take? I mean, Jack, I'm sure you've seen it in some of the groups, haven't you?
Yeah, it's such a bugbear. I think the question should be, I'm playing Death Guard tonight. I've struggled with this matchup before. What are certain options that I could develop into my current list to help me deal with that matchup? You know, if it could be a weapon swap out, or it could be add a this unit and stuff like that, rather than saying I need a whole army to go beat this one army. That's for me, like in what we're doing in the competitive forum, that's completely pointless. It's just fake experimenting and testing, isn't it? Because you're completely just manipulating the game, so you don't really learn anything.
Yeah, and I think obviously we've kind of sort of put this to a bit of an extreme, right?
Yeah.
And if you're probably listening to this podcast, you're already like, well, I don't list tailor anyway. But Jack's made a really good point there. There's nothing wrong with getting feedback on how you're doing against certain matchups. And list tailoring, there's nothing wrong with it going into a tournament thinking, okay, I need to have an option for Death Guard. I need to have a tool in the toolbox for Eldar. Like you said, I need maybe, if your army really struggles against Psychers, maybe you add something in. And that's where list tailoring specifically doesn't help you, because you're only ever going to use the one thing that you put into your list to kill it.
Yeah.
Because list tailoring doesn't teach you the ability to get most utility out of your unit. So, like I said earlier, how do you use aggressors? Well, they can kill Horde in the shooting phase, and they can actually kill vehicles in the combat phase. So that you're gaining utility. You're playing in all phases of the game.
And list tailoring can also come out from almost like unintentionally.
Okay, yeah.
So, for instance, if you only play against one person, and they only have one army, and you only have one army, and you play against that person every week, kind of thing. So, for instance, okay, I run Jakari, you run Space Marines. Okay, so naturally over time, my list will start to change because you've bought some units. I'll go, okay, how do I counter that unit? Okay, you're taking loads of 2 wound Space Marines. Okay, so I'm gonna load my entire army up with disintegrators, which is strength 5
and 2 damage.
2 damage.
Yeah.
And then you go to a tournament.
Yeah.
And your first 2 opponents are Eldar.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, I don't have the guns to deal with their toughness 7 vehicles, and they've got lots of 10 model units. And then you come up against an orc player who's just got hordes and hordes of 30 boys, and like, I just don't have the firepower to kill these off.
Yeah. So what I think you're sort of referring to there, Joe, is obviously for the guys listening. You need to think: are you in a little kind of bubble of a certain few armies? And if so, try to think outside of that, because obviously over the last 6 months or 2 years, however long you've been playing this game, you would have, by even without knowing it, slightly adapted your list to beat those armies, because that's what you're playing against all the time. It's normal for that to happen. So just make sure you're remaining unbiased and always remain and be open to different suggestions based on the fact that you could be up against Custodes game 1, you could be up against Harlequins game 2. They play extremely differently, and the tools needed to kill Custodes are completely different to Harlequins, or even outplay them, even if you can't kill them. So that's the other thing, is not necessarily tailoring to the point where you can kill an opponent, because so many people do tailor to kill, and what they're not doing, and which is again something I'm going to talk about a lot more tomorrow, is tailoring which is what you should be doing to win the mission, because there's a big difference between killing and winning the mission. Okay, nice, I like it. Jack, another one from you, please.
So I've got under and over buffing a unit in your list building. So what I mean by that is I think Chaos is a really good example of over buffing. If you look in the Chaos Space Marine Codex and all their supplements, you can stack an enormous amount of buffs onto a single unit, which is great, and it's great fun. It's interesting to look at, like, the amount of stuff that you can do to one unit. But what you'll find is you're wasting points and resources to over buff this unit. So whatever it's going to do is going to overkill it completely. Like, maybe it could be a unit of obliterators shooting twice with veterans of the Long War with full re-rolls, and you give them a Master of Sanctity to give them Master of Possession to give them a 4-up invuln, etc. And all of a sudden you've spent way too many points for this one unit, and it's and if your opponent can block out the obliterators in this example, you've wasted all that support that's gone with it. So, it could be a couple of characters, some CPs, etc. And if you're hinging your game plan around it, it could really throw you off your game. So I think there's a general, you want to make sure that you can balance out your buffs across different units at different times, and that you can potentially double stack on one unit if you need to get a certain job done. So having that flexibility across your army to put, you could put average buffs across everything, or you could really hyperpower 2 units, for example, to get a specific job done.
Yeah, I think, no, I completely agree, because when we talk about the word competitive, a lot of people think, and we've had this on our channel recently when we've been doing our live stream games on a Tuesday night, they're like, yeah, but this isn't the most competitive army list, or that's not the most competitive unit. But what they're looking at it is like a very sort of microcosm, where they're thinking, well, it's not the most broken unit in the game, why are we not taking it? Because often, for me, when you actually look at what is competitive, I actually think competitive, a better word to sort of describe the word competitive is efficient. You want to be efficient rather than overpowering or overbearing necessarily with one particular unit. Yes, there's some great units out there in the game, but like you said there, Jack, if you've got this one unit that does this one thing so well that actually to the point where it can't really do anything else, or yes, it might do that one thing, but then it's inhibiting the rest of your army to do so many other things, then yeah, it's a complete waste of points, and you really haven't utilised, those command points and stratagems and character buffs in the right way, to the point where you're like, well, you're just completely overkilling everything you look at. But then if you're not killing enough units, so yes, you might be able to use that unit of obliterators to pick up, I don't know, insert massive strong object in the game first of all, but then maybe what is not being able to do is pick up 6 different units when you're playing against Orc MSU style OBSEC board control list, right?
Yeah, and a good player will ensure that you never use that unit of obliterators in that game to what you want to do. They'll force you to drop down because you say you're in deep strike. They'll screen you out, force you to drop down out of range of any valuable targets. You've then declared your hand, and then that unit gets picked up in return. So yeah, it's just getting that balance across to make sure you've got different options. If plan A doesn't necessarily work, you've got a plan B in the locker.
Yeah, and that, I think you've just touched on a really nice segue there into something we talk a lot about, is threat saturation. And again, this is something we cover on the Academy in a lot more detail, and I'll briefly touch on it tomorrow. But if you aren't able to threat saturate the table, then unfortunately, if you've just got this one this one trick, then it's easily, played around, and a good player will pick that up. But actually, this is the real weird thing, that a good player will pick it up and just, avoid it or work around it. But somebody that's newer to the game is going to have an awful experience against you. We often hear this a lot. Oh, this one thing's terrible. And I'm like, but it's not. But the problem is that these players that are trying to be competitive are taking probably the most broken aspects and most overpowered units of the game, that if you're unable to deal with them, are really, really good. But when you get to a tournament, you don't need to worry about the players that are, slightly newer to the game or less experienced or less skillful than you, because you should naturally beat them on skill anyway. What you need to worry about is the players at the top that potentially have equal amounts or more skill than you and have an equal or better list than you, and they're the people you need to worry about. Because if you want to progress through the tournament, that's who you're actually going to have to beat at some point, because of Swiss pairings. That's the way tournaments work. You win your first game, you play another winner. You win that game, you play somebody who's won 2 games. It's not a free-for-all random fest. So you have to be able to reliably beat those good skilled players. And so I think that's a really, really nice point there, Jack, and actually something I hadn't considered until now. You've brought that up. I think that's really good. Yeah, absolutely. So my next one is going to be the net list.
Oh.
Copying an internet list.
Yeah.
Or listening to the advice on the internet. Obviously, unless you're listening to us, and then it's golden, obviously.
Ours is the best.
Yeah, ours is just the best, isn't it? I'm glad you agree, Joe. I agree.
Yeah.
I'm sure Jack agrees as well. But we agree. Anyway, so let's take sort of net listing is where you just go, okay, cool, well, this army does really, really well. I'm going to take that exact list and take it to a tournament. And it's okay as a base.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with looking, okay, why is that working? Or, this is working well. Rather than just skipping straight to, I'm going to buy it, build it, and play it, there's one really important question that they obviously failed to ask, and that is, why is it working well?
Yeah.
With every single top tournament list, 9 times out of 10, that player that designed that list would have put it together with real sort of tenacity, and they would have sort of played so many games with it. They would have refined it and refined it and refined it time and time again, and they'll be able to justify every single decision, whether it's weapon choice, whether it's character, whether it's the warlord trait, the relic, the stratagem usage, the order in which those stratagems are used, or whatever it might be. Many people have looked at my Blood Angels list and they'll say to me, oh, but you don't need that in the list, or I think this is better, your list isn't as good as this one, but they haven't really understood why I have every single moving part in that list. And actually, as soon as you change it, then you're not even utilising the entire toolbox. The toolbox is there to be used, and that is why it's gone on to win GTs and given me reliable results. But you can't just take it and play with it. You need to take it, if you are going to use a net list, and really break down, ask questions, ask yourself why. Okay, when you are playtesting it, what's the justification for this unit's job role? Why has it got that many models in the unit and not, why 8 not 10? Why 8 not 6? Why 5 and not 10? Whatever it might be, whatever those questions are, you need to be able to know exactly why it's on the table. Is it there to kill? Is it there to hold? Is it there to do something completely, utterly different? For example, my Collector's Assassin. There's not one person I've ever met that's told me why I take my Collector's Assassin, for the true reason why I take him. And it's nothing to do with his ability to stop psychic powers, which is why everybody thinks I have him in the list. It's not. It's to do with a completely different reason. So therefore, that's either going to be 100 points wasted that somebody's going to have, or what they're not going to be able to do is utilise that list properly. And they're going to they'll buy it, build it, paint it, get it to the table, and they'll be like, well, this just doesn't work. This just dies turn 1, or this just isn't very good on the mission front, or whatever, because then they don't have my playstyle, they don't have my skill set, they don't have... they didn't ask themselves and justify why they've got every single troop or option in there. So that's just one thing, is if you are going to use a net list, ask yourself why every single decision has been made. Okay.
And net listing is like one of the worst things you can do if you're starting a faction for the first time. So for instance, if I wanted to start demons tomorrow, And Max, who's on our academy,
Yep.
he knows his demon army inside out, and he's written us full justifications for why those units are there. And his demon army, apart from Nurglings, there is one of every possible unit in that list.
Yep.
And if I picked up lists, put it on the table now, I'd be like, I don't know what this army does or why it does it. I might as well be learning an entirely new language.
Yep.
And he's gone through the last few years of just this journey of discovery and learning what this does and why this does it. This unit's here to buff this unit, and then that one buffs another one. This unit's in here to put this specific role. But I wouldn't know that because I don't know the army.
Max has had coaching calls with me on the list.
Yeah.
Every single week he takes part in all of our lessons. So we have a lesson called Pick Your Secondaries. Again, we'll probably show this off on YouTube at some point, what we do there. He takes part in that every week. He takes part in all of the tasks. He does all the homework. He is play testing constantly. Every single training night on a Wednesday, he's there. He's playing on tabletop, and he's constantly making these refinements, subtle adjustments, and most importantly, being self-critical.
Yeah.
Does this thing need to be in my list? What is it doing? Is something else I could put in even better? Jack, did you have any comments on net listing?
Yeah, I think don't shy away from it. There's definitely an element of work smarter than harder, because if you pick up a list that's recently won a big tournament, you go, right, I know that list in its core, its main build, it can win a tournament. You go, great. But then make it your own, as you say. You can't just pick up the list and win a tournament. You've got to do the hard work that goes behind it. So you got to learn what it is, and I think good lists are spawned from previous winners. So your net list from a previous winner, and then good players will pick that up, develop it, and adapt it to suit their strategy and play style, or development in the meta, etc. Things like that. So I think it gets a lot of negative press, net listing, but it's a great tool that we have access to all these lists and things easily, readily available, and you can pick up a load of models or a new army. Go, I know fundamentally that these units together make a cohesive force that can play competitively. I just need to figure out the bits around the edges and the strategy and how to play it to make it work for me.
Yeah, and again, it just comes down to asking yourself why, right? Again, look at my Blood Angels. I fell into the habit of, okay, what is everyone else taking with Blood Angels? Oh, they take a Smash Captain. And it took me 2 tournaments and about 30 games for me to realise, what is he even doing in this list? He is a crutch. He's actually a big waste of points. So it took me a while, because I had this belief based on the internet that everybody had to take a Smash Captain with ignore Overwatch and damage 4 Thunderhammer, and you fight him twice and you can do this, and a Libby Dread that does that, and 3 units of Scouts at the time was the thing. And I was like, what about Incursors? And this was back in 8th edition. I took Incursors to the LVO, and now look at Incursors. They are the primary troop choice that people take, and this is actually even before the Codex is just dropped and made Scouts elites. But it took me to go, what is the role Scouts are providing, and how do I make that, like Jack said, my own? And how do I take the Smash Captain and what he does, and how do I make a difference? So, I'm rocking Dante in my Blood Angels list now, because for numerous reasons, as we'll get into. But anyway, guys, I think we've covered some fantastic options there, and I think we've covered a lot of the bases, but I'm going to be covering how you actually go about writing yourself a really good, well-balanced competitive army list on this masterclass on Saturday the 31st at 4 p.m. or Greenwich Mean Time or UK time. So please, if you are interested in learning more about how to write a good army list, and you really want to fast track your knowledge, and I'm going to give you some really good takeaway points for you to have, and if you do sign up for the masterclass, like I said, it is free, and you do then get 48 hours to replay that if, for example, you can't make that time. So do sign up for it. The link is www.vanguardtactics.com/masterclass, and you can head to that, sign up, it's completely free. And anyway, Jack and Joe, thanks so much for joining me on this segment of the show.
Thank you for having me.
Absolute pleasure.
Yeah, thank you very much, guys. So we're going to take a short break, and we'll be back with me and Paul Murphy, the legend from Forge the Narrative podcast, where we dive more into the Blood Angels. So we'll see you just after this short break. This podcast is sponsored by Foreground Publishing, who are one of the leading designers and manufacturers of tabletop, pre-painted terrain. And check out the Vanguard Tactics terrain series, which is perfect for competitive 40k games. Just unbox, build, and play. Mr. Paul Murphy, how you doing?
Yo, man, thanks for having me.
Well, honestly, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on the show.
Man, I love talking with you. I mean, we have some similar interest.
Yeah, but there's one real big red interest, I would say, that we share.
Red, sometimes black, sometimes gold, sometimes blue.
They're like the primary colours, aren't they? Black,
Yep.
gold, and red. So yeah, definitely. And that's going to be the topic of our conversation on today's show, because I want to get a little bit more of an insight from another Blood Angel player's perspective. So first of all, Paul, what is it that really kind of made you pick the Blood Angels? What was it about that army that you thought, yeah, this is the one that I'm going to go big on?
Well, I'm not going to lie. The first time that I ever kind of like said, let me learn more about this chapter was the cover of, I think it was the compendium. I don't know if it's the compilation of the compendium from back in the day when it was just a White Dwarf article or whatever, but it had all these red Space Marines with a gold Space Marine in the middle. And I really liked that contrast, the way it looked, and it was a blood drop. I'm like, you know what, let me learn more. But what got me really hooked into the chapter is that in the original art or lore and stories and stuff is that they were these heroes, human heroes that had this, or I guess post-human heroes that had this dark secret. They were trying to contain this rage, this bloodlust inside of them, and didn't want anyone else to know that. So they had this like dark secret, and how they kind of helped hide that was through art and story and battle. And I'm like, you know what, this is amazing.
No, that's quality. No, the artwork for all the Blood Angels is unreal. So yeah, kind of one of the reasons, why I play them myself. So yeah, definitely, mate. And in terms of how have you been getting on with the Blood Angels kind of prior to this kind of Space Marine Codex, and also obviously the elephant in the room, which is the new Blood Angel kind of FAQ/index that we've kind of got until the supplement. So how are you getting on with the Blood Angels before this? Because I really want to know what you think of it.
Well, when the BA hit originally, they had these seemingly really cool rules, but originally for 8th, was they had these seemingly cool rules, but yet they didn't quite fit in with the other rules of the game. It's like, this would be cool if this basic rule already didn't kind of make that less cool. So then when we got the Psychic Awakening, that all came back. We got some additional stratagems, some additional things to really give them those teeth. That is a bit of a pun.
Yeah.
Forgive me. I went right into it, though.
You pun away, Paul. It's fine.
Yeah. But they've got that teeth with the Psychic Awakening, and it was a great time to be a Blood Angels player. I mean, you've had some crazy success with the list, and what the neat thing is that you had some list elements that maybe I didn't choose, and I had list elements that you didn't choose, but the thing is we could both be right. And so it added all this flavor and complexity and potential diversity. There wasn't a linear path to winning. You could do all this, all these cool things with the Codex.
Yeah,
and the Psychic Awakening.
Yeah, no, I'd agree. In a lot of the games I played, I would use 50% of the stuff from Psychic Awakening and 50% of the stuff from the Codex, wouldn't you? You kind of like, right, a bit of Fall on Fury here, a bit of Heroic Intervention there, and, then having the ability like Transhuman, that was great on the Sanguinary Guardian stuff. So there was definitely some really, like you said, nice, unique elements from each bit, which really played 8th. I would say, played 8th well, but then when 9th hit, obviously the rules on fly changed, screening changed, engaging, we had Desperate Breakout, all the tricks that the Blood Angels were good at. I felt like GW thought, no more wrapping and trapping for you so easily, and no more jumping over screens with your Smash Captains. You've got to engage all the units that you declare now. So there was a lot of things that changed during 9th, but I've actually found, and I don't know if you disagree, that they've played the mission really well, because they're good combat threats, especially if you build into the combat with the Blood Angels. You can knock people off objectives, and you're durable enough to stay there. So it's quite good to score well on the primary. Would you agree with that?
I do. I think that the big changes, like some fundamental rules changes, but it is across the board to things. So the armies that relied on some of that stuff, you have to to kind of reconfigure your list. But one of the neat things about the Blood Angels is that they are at their core a Marine chapter, and now even more so at the core a Marine chapter. With the new Space Marine Codex.
Yeah. So in terms of like, what would diving into this kind of Blood Angels FAQ that obviously came out? What was your initial reaction? I want to know how you felt when you saw it originally and you thought you've got your Space Marine Codex in hand. Well, what was your reaction to the FAQ?
It's a series of highs and lows.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
okay.
My next two questions were what your highlights and what your lowlights. So let's go over your highlights first.
Well, a little bit of tongue in cheek, because when you crack open the FAQ and you see that a lot of the stratagems that you have come to rely on are not there. So Forlorn Fury being one of them, On Wings of Fire being another.
3d6 charge.
Those are, and then some of the relics too, that you've kind of come to appreciate. Those are things that are, I mean, I want to say what I relied on them at the time, but now in ninth, I believe they're just kind of what I'd classify into the more win situation.
Yeah.
Because, you could cross vast distances with Forlorn Fury and with On Wings of Fire and do things that surprise your opponent, whatever. But now with the board being a little bit smaller, there's really less of a dependency on that. What those stratagems really did was bought you a turn, but the proximity of the armies to each other and the confines of the constraints of the board also are like a free turn of movement, if you look at it that way.
Yep.
And so it's a bit of a kind of a bittersweet, like I understand. And I also think, look, I guess this is probably wishful thinking, but I hope that some of those elements get injected back into a Codex supplement along the way. The other up and down is, hey, we get to take Centurions now.
Yep.
But Centurions are not necessarily the best choice. But at the same time, it's not really a classic, Blood Angel unit anyway. Sanguinary Guard are still great.
Yeah.
I think that the basic equipment on them it's even a little bit easier to get into your list now. And it still does really well. So the Sanguinary Guard, the fact that, this is kind of jumping onto it, is the Blade Guard went up in troop number. So now you can take 6 Blade Guard if you want. And Vanguard vets, I know you're a big fan of the Vanguard vets. They got exponentially better.
Yeah, getting that Power Fist going to just a flat 2 damage rather than D3, and also like the interaction with the Ancient now gives you +1 to hit. So it means if you are rocking a Power Fist, you're not going to be hitting on 4s. You're going to be hitting back on 3s again, which is great. So that's fantastic, and not to mention the extra wound, which is obviously goes without saying extremely strong. And also the Storm Shield now gives those guys a 2+ save rather than just a 3+, because it was typically attrition and just lots of volume of shots that would get rid of Vanguard vets. So actually having a 2+ save just kind of, I think, is better than having a 3+ stock. I like it.
I think that Storm Shield interaction is something that we kind of looked at like, ooh, that's change, and we don't like to be changed, but I think in situations just like you're describing, it's going to be a real benefit.
Yeah, and how have you dealt with the change? Have you, already from some of the things that you've said, what are some of the things that you do from a sort of mental perspective that you see a change? How do you deal with it? Because I know a lot of people are quite upset about it, so how have you dealt with it to be a bit more positive?
Well, I guess let me say I benefit from a large collection of Blood Angels. So I'm not limited necessarily in what I'm going to take by just what I have painted. Or let's say if I built a 2,000 point list and that's all I have, which is fine. This is not I've been collecting Blood Angels for 20 plus years. So I have just a large pool of things to draw from. So I can look at it, I think, a little bit more objectively than maybe some hobbyist out there. So I just want to put that out there as a real concern of things. But like mentally and emotionally, I kind of enjoy the ability to go into it with fresh eyes and see what maybe the new efficiencies are. Probably like a lot of people that listen to your show, I like to really see if I can personally wring out some value out of whatever this new book or codex that I've been presented with.
Yeah, it's a little bit a little bit like you said, taking a look at fresh eyes through the codex, through the FAQ, forgetting what you had and what you don't have. Think about what you have, at your disposal now, and even things like, I can't believe I'm about to say this, Paul, but I would actually consider putting a whirlwind in my list now, just to make use of that stratagem to make another unit fight last, because actually that then helps me in certain matchups which the Blood Angels struggle, like the Death Guard, where they turn off your basically charging benefit for striking first. So actually, being able to shoot that one big 20-man unit of Death Guard, making them fight last, means that all my Sanguinary Guard can go in and I can actually attack, on the tip of where I want to. So yeah, like you said, kind of looking at this with fresh eyes, and again, looking at the FAQ with fresh eyes as well, looking at the characters, because actually there was a huge boost to some of these characters, which I think have got some really cool interactions. So the first one to obviously talk about is Dante. What are your thoughts?
One more second on that, if I can, is that one of the benefits of this is, look, even going into it with that objectiveness, knowing that I may have to change up, my entire list or whatever, I was relieved the fact that I don't feel like a Blood Angel player has to do that. This is a smooth blend from 8th to 9th, and things like your Sanguinary Guard and maybe some of your, if you were taking some Primaris as your troops before, they're still good today. So you're going to change what maybe some your primary attack things may still be the same. Your primary defensive things may be the same. I think your utility things may be changing a little bit, and that's not necessarily too dramatic, too drastic.
Yeah, it's like the sort of 20%, isn't it? So your 80% of your list is probably going to stay or remain the same in terms of your models, and it's just that little bit of okay, you can't ignore Overwatch now with a relic. So okay, how are you going to get around that? Well, maybe it's going to have to force you to use terrain a little bit better and fight from. So actually, it's going to improve, I think, you as a player, because you're going to have to use better tactics. A little bit like when they got rid of the wrapping trap because of the 2CP stratagem Desperate Breakout. Now you have to wrap 2 units, and ideally with the same unit. And if you can do that, they still can't get out of it, but it stretches you as a player. So again, it's making the skill level of the game just that little bit harder by removing some of the ease of doing things. So no, Paul, I definitely agree, and I think it's a good move, and I cannot wait to see what we do get in our supplement. If we get even more tricks in, extra bits back, that would be fantastic. But again, that's going to be like, let's get used to it now, and it'll be like the icing on the cake, won't it?
Yeah, I think so. And if you were taking, 16 or 24 Sanguinary Guard or something like that before, you can still take that and feel very confident that you'll have a similar win percentage.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. So what are your thoughts on Dante? Because in the past, he wasn't great. So what are your thoughts on him now?
I'll make a broad sweeping statement first. I love all these characters. I think they've done a great job of making them seem somewhat compelling and interesting, and matching the rules wise of what you want them to be. Like Dante, he's the oldest living hero of the Imperium. In some stories, he is actually the golden warrior that will defend the Emperor on the last days of the Imperium. And he's got rules, I think, that match that now.
Yeah, I would agree. Especially like some of the nuances that he's now got with the, Lord Regent. He can basically give you that +1 CP, and also getting the epic hero of the Imperium ability, where once per game, you can use an epic deed stratagem and it costs you 0 CPs. I think that's amazing. Like Dante fighting in death for free. That's going to be incredible, I think, and could be really quite, situationally good, but also game-changing, right?
Yeah, I mean, swinging in. So the Blood Angels have the +1 to wound in the first round of combat, or when they heroically intervene or charge or whatever. So coming in at strength 7 base and then getting the +1 to wound means he can effectively engage anything in the game. And if it exists as a miniature on the tabletop, you can feel confident throwing Dante into it.
Yeah. Yeah, and he obviously gets the chapter master abilities now as well. So yeah, I must admit, I'm looking at him as a potential. I'd love to see him in my list. Yeah,
each time an attack is made against this model, subtract 1 from that attack's hit roll. I didn't say anything about ranged or melee attack. That is, anytime an attack is made against this model.
Yeah, that's
subtract
true,
1.
actually.
So, in addition to his 4+ invulnerable save and 6 wounds, which is, I mean, 6 is a healthy stack of wounds on a character, and now and a 2+ armor save, you are further increasing his durability by shaving off anything that would even touch him by an additional 16, 17%.
Yeah, no, because that's really interesting. You mentioned that actually because the Sanguinor, he's -1 to hit, but only in melee. So actually, Dante is any. The wording's very different, isn't it? So yeah, Dante -1 to hit from shooting and combat. So brilliant. Yeah,
And
let's hope
I
that
love the
stays.
Sanguinary. Yeah, it's a perfect segue into him, is that miraculous savior is yeah, really good. And
Do,
in the fact that you can put him almost directly into melee is uh, yeah, I mean, he's going to get benefit from all his rules all the time.
Yeah, because he's lost the ability to give +1 attack because now it doesn't. Sorry, he still has it, but it doesn't stack with shock assault. So if you're charging in, you're not going to see any benefit from the Sanguinor because you'll be using shock assault. But it really helps you when you're getting bogged down in combat. You know, if you've got, let's say, a unit of incursors are being bogged down with a unit of 20 orcs or something, or Necron warriors, it just means that you're going to be able to put out a little bit more volume of attacks, obviously, which is still great. And I think there's some other little combinations we can use. But do you want to talk about quickly this this thing you mentioned here, the miraculous saver? Because I think this could catch people out. So just want to talk about quickly how you would use it using the Blood Angels, and then maybe what you need to watch out for if you're against Blood Angels.
I love it. This is one of those things to where if you just remember you have it, you're already, ahead of the game, I think. So at the end of the heroic intervention step of your opponent's charge phase, if this model has not yet been set up on the battlefield, and if any enemy units finished a charge move within engagement range of any friendly Blood Angels units this phase, you can set up this model with an engagement range of one of those enemy units. This model counts as having performed a heroic intervention in the turn it uses this ability.
Yeah, nice. So
Yeah, and
what?
this doesn't say anything about what turn it happens. You could be somewhat cagey and strategic about how and when you use this, and it doesn't have to be any time. You may.
Yeah. No, so it could be a turn 6. Sorry, not turn 6. A turn 5. It could be a turn 1. Anytime your opponent makes a charge move, you can come down and heroically intervene to it. So I mean, people are going to have to watch out for that because I think in the right place, in the right situation, you could pick somebody off an objective. You could stop yourself from getting picked off that objective. And having the Sanguinor come into combat with you at strength 6, -4, flat 2 damage, doing mortal wounds, in addition with, a solid 6 attacks. Yeah, he's no slouch in combat. So I think. I mean, I love the Sanguinor in my previous list. He's still a solid slot in mine now. So yeah, is there any other sort of characters that have jumped out at you and you thought, okay, they need to be making my list?
Corbulo so people are really hot on the Sanguinary Priest in Corbulo as well, because you can accelerate when you get to use your assault phase rules. So your
Yeah,
assault doctrine rules, and these. I think that on paper, this is amazing. I think that practical application in the games will. You need cooperate. Okay, let me guess. On the tabletop side, these are one of those things to where the effectiveness is somewhat controlled. You need your opponent to be cooperating with you, and a savvy opponent may not cooperate with you to allow you to get full benefit of this.
yeah,
And so that's why I think that reading it seems awesome. And this could play out completely different, by the way. This is just one man's opinion. I think that that is one of those things that once you actually put it on the table and enough people become comfortable with how all that works, you may not get the sheer benefit from it. And Corbulo may not make it. You might want to have a sanguinary priest, with the jump pack, for instance, to be able to keep up with stuff.
yeah. I think that's certainly the way I'm going to be looking to go is with the jump pack because I'm running a very fast jump pack based list. Whereas if I was running maybe impulsors, blade guard, and there's nothing stopping you putting Corbulo in a drop pod with a few friends. So you
Right.
could easily do that. You could chuck a librarian in there or whoever else in that drop pod, and that bring that down to support you wherever you need it, and then he's in range turn 1, isn't he? So there's still options, I think, to get him in place. So what are you kind of working on hobby-wise then, Paul? Have you got anything on at the moment?
So one more thing on Corbulo, if I can, is that his Sanguinary High Priest ability at the end of your movement phase, this model can use the Combat Restorative ability twice instead of once. Also pretty stout.
Yeah.
So that's be on the watch for that. Corbulo is a high value target if he is on the table, and presented out there for your opponent. So yeah, hobby table. Sorry.
Yeah. No, that's all right. No, I think it's again good to, because if he's picking up, for example, aggressors or anything that's 40 odd points plus, like a Blade Guard model or a Sanguinary Guard, and he can pick up 2, then brilliant. You're getting a lot of points back over the course of that game just from Corbulo. So I think that's good shout.
He can pay for himself. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. See, hobby desk. What you working on at the moment?
Right now on my desk, I have 4 Impulsors, Blood Angel Impulsors.
Okay. Strong.
Yeah, I think that, I've been a kind of a big proponent of the Impulsors since they came out, and nothing's changed. I think that this is a tank with, it's not a ton of points, and I'm afraid I don't have the point cost for them right now in front of me, but it's still not a ton of points, and you get some reliable guns that get the benefit from the early stage doctrines of the Marine list, and it holds 6 dudes, 6 Primaris, and so you can make this thing durable if you want to. I actually kind of prefer the more shootier version. I prefer the gun up top, other than the shield.
Yeah.
That's just my play style. I like rolling as many dice as I can. But I also like the ability to kind of threaten maybe a couple of different targets, smaller targets with one thing. Like this guy, this tank can threaten realistically 2 different types of targets on the tabletop, and live. He can live for a couple of turns, and all for kind of a bargain price. And you get to put some pretty stout things in it, potentially like Blade Guard vets or Death Company intercessors, assault intercessors. But if you're a Blood Angel player and you are building any assault intercessors, I think you probably should go ahead and make them Death Company.
Yeah, be rude not to, isn't it, really? So, you're right, because I think actually when you look at that, because the invulnerable safe and the impulse has gone from a 4 to a 5, actually putting some DACA on there means you can actually, threaten screens a little bit more, because Blood Angels, and especially if you're going more infantry based, you can't just jump over screens, you actually need to blow them away. So now having, let's be honest, your impulsors, they only need to survive a couple of turns. They need to get your units into position turn 1. Turn 2, they need to make a charge and take the overwatch for you. So if they can get 2 good turns of shooting out of them to remove some screens, just means you can open up a juicier target for those Blade Guard or whatever it is you've stuck in there, to really deal the damage in combat. So I think that's actually a pretty fair bet. And if it has survived, your opponent probably doesn't really want to be shooting impulsors unless they've took a secondary, the bring it down secondary against you. But then they're not shooting your troops, which are actually winning you the points on the primary, or also smashing their face in. So I think it's a good call, Paul. I like it. Yeah,
you're exactly right. These things can prove to just be a huge distraction. The same thing that they want to fire at this thing, a high damage weapon, is something with a decent AP to get through and punch through some damage, which is kind of like the exact same thing they want to be firing at a Sanguinary Guard. So you're kind of making them make some potentially bad choices, and it's kind of what you want. You want to create confusion, target confusion for your opponent, not rules target confusion for your opponent.
Yeah, like threat saturation, I call it. So they're like, they don't know they literally do not have enough guns or firepower to kill everything. So you're just presenting all of the threats in one go, rather than just going, here's one, shoot it, then it dies. Okay, next turn, here's something else. Like you said, threat that, cause that confusion for them to make the wrong mistake as well.
Yeah, it's some, really where they make a risky thing, or they have to overcommit. So if they start firing at an impulsor, and it's conceivable that 2 or 3 las cannons don't kill this thing. So, and then if they do get most of its wounds down with some of their shots, they kind of have to continue to fire at it until it's gone, or they have wasted an entire turn, and there's a very potential for them to tar pit themselves into that situation with one of these vehicles.
Yeah, and it's an interesting sort of list build because I'm not going down that build myself. I'm going, like I said, heavy jump pack. So I think it'd be really good for us to sort of compare notes in maybe 6 months' time, and also maybe get another chat again once we see the supplement to see if your views have changed. But I'd be really interested to find out how you've been getting on with the impulsors, and I can feedback how I've been getting on with the jump packs. And ultimately, we're both kind of leaning into the sort of combat side of things with the Blood Angels. And obviously, Paul, I love sharing notes with you because you make me think about things in a different way. So brilliant.
I still think the jump packs is the strongest thing right now, but that's untested. So I think this is like right now in the period of the game, this is our opportunity to get in there and muck about a bit, play with things. Like I actually didn't like the Blade Guard vets when they were a 3-man squad. I thought a 3-man squad, they're just basically dirtling around the tabletop and with middle of the road where ranged weapons and then not necessarily crazy impressive assault capabilities. But now with a 5-6-man squad, 5-man and a character or whatever coming out of one of these things, I'm a little bit more excited about them. So I would like to experiment with it on the tabletop.
Yeah, or just take a good 18 of them and break them down into a 6 combat squad at all, and you've just got all these little units everywhere, and that could be crazy good in some other matchups where you're fighting against MSU style, or keep them together if you're fighting a horde and you need all the attacks you've got. So I think there's definitely some utility in that unit, and interested to see how you get on with them, Paul.
Yeah,
so anyway, Paul.
Hobby desk things. I'm sorry, I'm dragging it out, but like other hobby desk things is that the characters are changing. We may not, our Smash captains, as they stand right now, might not be what gets us, what we want right anymore. This is so with Marines, you have the kind of the luxury of being able to you really dive deep into your bits box and make some impressive looking character models. And that's also on my hobby desk. I think guy with lightning claws is not absurd right now. It might not be unheard of to see on the tabletop.
Yeah, they got some play. Yeah, no, certainly I'm mixing up my characters that I've been using to completely different ones now. So, you're right. I'm looking at actually a Dante. I'm going to see if I can make him work. So I'm looking at a good conversion at the moment. I've just converted my Sanguinary Priest with Jump Pack and maybe even a Librarian with Jump Pack as well. So, definitely. I'll send you some pictures of the conversions and I'll put them up on the Instagram and stuff. So, anyway. So, Paul, thanks so much, mate, for coming onto the show. And where can people find you and what you're kind of working on at the moment?
So I run a show called Forge the Narrative with some great folks. Adam and Red are my regulars right now, and their insight into the game. We're players, but we're also kind of lore junkies and hobbyists and stuff. And so we do a weekly show. You can find us in any of the aggregators. It's called Forge the Narrative. Any of the podcast aggregators, love to your listeners to check us out if they haven't already. I'm also doing some work with the Nova Open Charitable Foundation, which is a brilliant organization that supports 3 well-known charities as well as some other smaller efforts. Doctors Without Borders, Breast Cancer Research, and the Fisher House are I think their primaries, but they sell raffle tickets for miniatures. So, and I say miniatures, I mean Titans and armies and stuff. The fall raffles are live right now. That's in the NovaOpenFoundation.org. You can see what's up there right now. It's a great way to support some of these great organizations, and the upside of potentially winning and a absolutely display quality miniature and or army for yourself. And this previous raffle, we did a virtual lounge where we hosted a 3-hour live show, kind of to push and to promote and do some entertainment for folks that may be getting some of these raffle tickets. And we're going to do it again coming up later this year. So keep your eyes peeled for that. But if you want to go and take a look at what is up right now, that is at the NovaOpenFoundation.org.
Okay, yeah, and I'll put the links into the show notes of this episode because I have a blog page for every single episode, Paul. So if you send me all the links, I'll put them all in there and people can check them out and, support the work you're doing. So, and they can definitely go and check out your podcast. It's certainly on my listen to every week. So, Paul, I really appreciate the work you've done and keep doing what you're doing, Paul. So, really appreciate your time as well.
Thanks for having me, man. I appreciate that.
Okay, mate. Take care and I'll see you soon.
This podcast is brought to you by the Vanguard Tactics Academy, the only online coaching course for Warhammer 40,000. At the VT Academy, not only do we help you win more games in the right spirit of the game, we'll build confidence and we'll help you get more value and enjoyment from your hobby and take you through step-by-step guides for everything from starting your first army to tournament play to advanced tactics. Sign up at vanguardtactics.com.